Bonjour! Welcome to another recipe on Cuisine de Michel. I'm Michelle, and today I'm going to be making baguettes, something that I actually have on my blog already, but I wanted to get a video version because I know that this is something that's a little bit tricky for some people to do or conquer. It's actually not as difficult as you think, and that's what I'm here to show you. So one thing that you do have to remember is to start what is called the poulish the night before. So this has already been done. I didn't film this part, but it is listed on my blog on how to make the poulish. It's just a simple mixture of flour, yeast, and water. So that's been sitting for 14.5 hours. So we're going to take that out. And put it in our stand mixer. Next, we're going to add in 418 grams of all-purpose flour. And this time I actually am using unbleached for this part, just because I happen to have some, but you can use regular bleached all-purpose flour. I've done it many times. I just wanted to try it today to see if it indeed actually makes a difference. And then we're going to use 1/2 tablespoon of instant active yeast. 1 cup plus 2 tablespoons of warm water, which this is about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And 2 teaspoons of salt, which I already measured out. So then we're going to use the dough hook on the mixer. Lock it in place. We're going to set that to stir. It's going to go for 4 minutes. And when it's first going, I usually get in here and kind of tamp the flour down around the edges. Just make sure it all gets mixed in really good. Okay, so now we have finished the 4 minutes of kneading. We're going to get this out here. You can see it's just kind of wrapped itself around the dough hook here, which is perfectly fine. And scrape it off of the dough hook. And I forgot to mention that this recipe comes from the King Arthur baking site. I'm actually using King Arthur unbleached flour. I'm not being sponsored by them. I'm just mentioning that so they get credit, because this is their recipe. I've only modified it very, very slightly. All right, so what we're going to do next is put this into, I've sprayed this bowl already with some baking spray. Put this in there. And then we're going to cover it up with that same piece of plastic I had from before. I'm going to cover that up and leave it in a warm place to sit for 45 minutes. So we'll be back in 45 minutes. The dough has been resting now for 45 minutes in a somewhat warm place. So the next step is to punch it down. So I'm just going to give a light punch and turn here. And after doing that, I'm going to cover it. I just use a regular plate because it happens to fit exactly for this. You don't have to put it in a proofer oven type thing like what I'm about to do. You can just leave it in a warm area again, but I found that this works best for me. I have a bread proof setting on my oven, which is around, I think, 100 degrees or so. So I'm going to put that in the oven. And it's going to stay there for 45 minutes. Alright, so now the dough has been in my proof in the oven for 45 minutes. You can see now it's much bigger. So now what we're going to do is we're going to divide it into 3 pieces, and each piece of plastic wrap out here, we're going to just spray it with some non-stick stuff. And it doesn't matter if you get it divided exactly evenly, that's not a big deal. This will at least give you an idea that the dough is pretty easy to handle. I'm just gonna kind of pinch it apart to divide it. Okay, that was kind of small, I might have to redivide, we'll see. Kind of check them to see how well I divided them. I think the first one's a little small, so I'm just going to pinch it a little bit off of this one and give it to the other dough ball. And then I just wrap each one up like this. You have to wrap it up very tight, just kind of like that. And we're going to leave these sit on the counter for at least 15 minutes, but you can go up to an hour. I'm gonna go 30 minutes because that's just how long I usually go, and they turn out fine. So I'll see you in 30 minutes. Okay, so the dough has been resting for just a few more minutes than 30 right now. So what we're gonna do is we're going to unwrap the dough. We'll just do one at a time here. We're going to flatten it out just a tiny bit, and then we're going to fold it over by about half. And you pinch this together, make the seam. Oops, got a little sticky on there. And then we're gonna turn it this way and do the same kind of thing again. We're just gonna kind of work the dough just a little bit until it starts to kind of get a little bit longer. Just kind of build some air in there, and eventually it just kind of starts getting longer. You see it want to stick to the counter just a little, and then what I usually do is just kind of let it use its own weight. I gotta get out. I know that's not the exact method you're supposed to do, but that's what I usually typically do. Now I've already buttered these, just a very, very slight coating of butter, just enough to make it a little bit non-stick. It's already non-stick pan, but just to be sure, and I don't like to use spray on my non-stick surfaces, so that's why I do that. And then we're going to repeat this process for the next 2. So you can see that I shaped them into the baguette shape in the pans. I cut this one in half because I like having 2 small loaves, so you can do that as well, since I have 4 cavities. So then what we do is I just use the same plastic wrap. I like to use the same one over again as possible. I'm just going to lay that over these. And they're going to sit here on the counter for another 30 minutes. Actually, it's going to be 45 total, but at the 30-minute mark, you're going to want to turn your oven on. So we're at the 30-minute mark. I'm going to show you how to set up the oven for baking. We want it to be ready to bake once these are finished doing their last proofing here on the counter. So we'll come back in 30 minutes. Okay, so these have been resting for 30 minutes. We are now going to remove our plastic wrap. They can sit for the remaining 15 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and put a timer for the remaining 15 minutes. So one of the things we're going to do is use what is called a bread lane. And that's just a fancy tool that has very sharp razor blade here, and it makes it easier to make cuts on here. We just make these nice little cuts. You make them in whatever design it is that you want. The tradition is to make it at kind of a 45-degree angle. After we've done that, we're going to set up our oven. Inside the oven, you only want to have one rack, and it should be up as high as possible. The very highest in my oven would be too high. It would be touching the elements, so we don't want that. This is the highest possible in my oven. And we're going to put, this is an enamel-coated cast iron pan. We're going to set that in the bottom. And that's going to be there for when we put water in here to make steam. Steam is important to make the crust really nice and crunchy for us. So we're going to heat the oven and the pan at 450 degrees Fahrenheit. And I use convection for this, but you wouldn't have to necessarily. So we're going to let that heat up, and then it'll be time to bake our baguettes. So the oven has now preheated, and as I was telling you before, what we have to do is we're going to want steam. You can already see the steam coming off of this, but I put about 1 3/4 cup of water in here, and I microwaved it for 3 minutes on high so that it would be nice and steamy. We're going to put the baguettes in first, and then we're going to do the water pour so you can see how this happens. Baguettes in. And then get ready to close this up as soon as you possibly can. And trap that steam in there. And the timer goes on for 25 minutes. And then we'll have baguettes. Yee! So the baguettes have finished baking. And after they finish their 25 minutes of baking, I prop the oven open just like this to let them sit for about another 5-6 minutes. You can let them completely cool in the oven if you wish. Doesn't matter either way. And look at those beauties. And there's my little ones. They are absolutely gorgeous. You can see they do not stick. They look gorgeous on the bottom and the top. Yes, this is really hot. I'm going to break it open so that you can see. I'm going to break it open over here. Whew, so hot. I'm going to grab my oven mitts. I can't do this. Oh, hear that sound? Isn't it gorgeous? Oh, look at that. Gorgeous bread inside. Nice and steamy hot. Makes you want to have some, doesn't it? So, as you can see, baguettes are super easy to make. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Baguettes. Tonight, we're going to be using these baguettes in another recipe, which we'll post after this, for cheese fondue. So please like, share, subscribe, and join us again when we have our cheese fondue with these wonderful baguettes. Au revoir.